Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vali Nasser, the Dean of Johns Hopkins SAIS, and it is my honor to welcome back Dr. Min Zhu for to SAIS and for us to host him for a discussion of the growth and reforms associated with China's move into the high income category. And why it's an opportune time to have this discussion, because while the trade war between the United States and China persists, it is critical to take a step back from the headlines to understand the context within which this current standoff occurs. China has achieved rapid economic growth for the last couple of decades, and today it has become the second largest economy in the world. That has reverberations, positive as well as negative, on the balance of economic and political power in the world. And I can think of no other expert to guide us through this transformative topic than Dr. Zhu. He's currently the chairman of the National Institute of Financial Research at Tsinghua University, a partner of Johns Hopkins SAIS. He also served as deputy managing director at the International Monetary Fund here in Washington, D.C. Of consequence for today's conversation is his former role as deputy governor of the People's Bank of China, where he was responsible for international affairs, policy research, and credit information. And prior to that position, he was the group executive vice president at the Bank of China. Dr. Zhu, a native of China, received his PhD and MA in economics from Johns Hopkins University, and we're very proud to welcome back Hopkins alumni to the school. MPA from Woodrow Wilson School of Public Affairs and International Affairs at Princeton University, and a BA in economics from Fudan University. And I would like to also thank our moderator for today's event, Dr. John Lipsky, the Peter G. Peterson Distinguished Scholar at the Henry A. Kissinger Center for Global Affairs and a senior fellow at the school's Foreign Policy Institute, and formerly deputy managing director of the International Monetary Fund. Thank you again for joining us today, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Zhu. Please.
Well, thank you, Dean Nasser, for the very kind words of introduction. And also thanks to John and thanks to Madeline for the invitation. So I will be able to back to SAS, to Hopkins, and back to this podium, actually. It is a great, great honor for me to be here, and also to this very distinguished panels. Distinguished audience. I sit next to here, Peter is here, a lot of friends are here. So also thank you very much for coming. I will talk about the China's moving into the high income categories, particularly focused on sectorial productivity growth and structural reform. And China's economic growth. Can I have a pager? Yeah, I need my AK-47. Someone here? Oh, this is the one. Okay, great, thank you. The growth of China is obviously quite a big issue, not only for Chinese, but also for the whole world, because China contributes more than 30% global growth in the past more than 10 years. And the sustainability of Chinese growth, even more important issue for the whole world, because being the second largest economy, China brings a lot of aggregate demand to the whole world, whether Chinese growth will be sustainable. And I think it's also important for the whole world as well. So this is really talks to whether China will be able to sustain its growth and moving into the high income categories. So here's the first chart we'll see. This is since 78, right? 40 years ago, China started economic reform. Per capita GDP is only $178. It's way, way low. Moving after into WTO, that's really the time to pick it up, right? You will see it's really 20-some years moving to here. But after WTO moved very strongly, and now China is around $10,000 per capita GDP threshold, which is very much called the middle income trap level. And meanwhile, the growth also peaked in roughly before the crisis and after crisis, but all the way down from 14% to today is roughly 6.2, 6.3%. So this is two questions, right? The first issue is the $10,000 middle income trap, whether China will be able to overcome. The second issue is whether China will be able to maintain sustainability for the growth rates around 6 or even lower around 5, and what will happen in the next 10 years. So I think that's the really issues I try to come through in this talk. Which button should I touch? Oh, that's a good one. The catch-up path is never be easier. I did a typical math study since I was see. So on the vertical, this is a growth, right? On the horizontal is a per capita GDP in terms percentage of a US level. So that's a catch up, see how much you catch up with US level. This is the group average for the whole emerging market. You will see started 60s, growth picked up, and the convergence also moved fast, roughly from 15% of US GDP moved to 20%, and the 70s, early 80s moved to roughly 23%. But then in the 80s, it's a growth state, but converging is a divergence go back, growth pick 80 again, so this is very much 80 debt crisis period. And you will see in the 80s and 90s, it's Asia financial crisis come again. So the growth picked up, but convergence did not. And until these new centuries, from year 2002, and the growth is gradually slow down, but the convergence continues. It's really not an easy process. It's more interesting, or in some ways, sadly, if you're looking for the Latin American catch-up, you will see in the 60s, Latin American countries have a growth rate around 3.5%, but they are really accountable 28 to 70s, around 30% of the US per capita GDP level now. But with 80s, debt crisis, and the growth is slowing down, converging become divergence, and during the whole 80s, growth gradually pick up, but did not converging at all. In the 90s, also no converging happened, although growth pick up. Until this century, you will see growth pick up, growth slow down, and recapped. But between 70s and today, in terms of converging, nothing happened in Latin American area. So per capita GDP in terms of share of the US is even smaller. So this chart also shows the challenge and difficulty for emerging market, low-income countries converging to move into a high category economy. It's really not easy. So where's China? China is particularly in a crossroad in a very interesting point. This is China. We picked a group of countries from 3,000 per capita GDP dollars. This is the years we'll see. The gradual take up until roughly, this is for the years, 3,000. Reach roughly 8,000 to 10,000 this level. Then we see the two group historical data. So one group is Malaysia, Brazil, and Mexico. They stay more or less around 8,000 to 10,000. Never move above. I will see Korea and Taiwan of China and moving over the trap and moving high into the $30,000 per capita GDP into the high income countries. And China is exactly point between. So whether China will move in line with this line or China will drop, go into the future with this line, I think that's real question and challenge for China and for the whole world. There are many facts and behind this converging, the catch-up stories and merit story behind the whole thing. But the key issue is the sectoral transformation. Historically, we did a lot of studies to put all the countries together, even with the US or advanced countries. We'll see during the development process, catching up process, the typical things that we all observe, the agriculture sectors, employments and the value added also drop. And the manufacturer will pick it up gradually, but will slow down in terms both of employments and both of value added. Manufacture is slightly different here because some countries like Germany and South Korea still maintain a certain high degree of manufacturing, but overall it still drops. So there is a clear sectoral shift, and the most important, service sector picked up, right? Service sector picked up. So this is the path. We also, you will move into a service sector, leaving the industry. So that's a typical path. But the real challenge is when China is also along this path. So you will see very much fitting the historical data. And this is the agriculture sector around from more than 40% drop down today. It's a little bit of 10%. And the whole manufacturing also peaked more than 50%, go down to a little bit of 40%, but service sector today more than 50%. So China is very in line with historical experience moving that line. But the real challenge is when industry share going down, service sector going up, the productivity issue is interesting because this is, I mentioned, the ratio of industry versus service labor productivities. That means you will see it's a 1.2, 1.3. Service sector productivity is still way low. The industry sector productivity is more than 20 to 25% higher than service sector. That's the real challenge. Your whole economy is moving into the service sector, but service sector have a productivity 20 to 25% lower than manufacturing. That means you're gaining 1% in service in GDP, you're losing 20% of productivity of 1% of GDP. So your growth will slow down. Which is also the typical phenomenon. What we observed the whole was when service sector gradually picked up and the growth will slow down. The slowdown will continue until service sector peaked around 70% and the growth will stabilize around 2.5. So that's the global experience. That's also the things we observed in the past, say more than 80 to 90 years across the countries in the world. What China followed that path, I think that's the real challenge. But before we move into the two sector productivity changes, let's focus on the industry sectors. What we found is also industry. In industry sectors, there's also a pretty deep structure change. There's a high-tech industry pick up quickly, particularly since year 2000, particularly after WTO entry. And the low-tech and the medium sectors and the industry, also the share has to go down. And also in terms of share for employment, you also see the high-tech pool really keeps, that's it, the median tech industry labor shares really drops quite dramatically. So China's manufacturer has been upgrading dramatically, which also bring in divergence in labor productivities. The high-tech sector have a much high on the labor productivity, and this is the median and the lower have a much lower. And if you're looking for, this is labor productivity, it's a total factor productivity, which is a different model, different measure to try to see whether it's two things coincide. You will see also high-tech have a much high and total factor productivity as well, but not on the low and on the median. So things also happen within the industry. I think that's important. But really compared with the whole world, what we found is with the world, the high-tech still relatively low, but actually it's a low-tech compared with the world productivity is relatively high. So that means although China, within the industry, high-tech sector grows strongly, have high productivity, but compared with the whole world, the productivity level is still low. Let's give us the confidence. That's the room to catch up. This is very interesting. So China growth seems contradictory to each other, but it's really the real things. China high-tech sector within industry increased dramatically, expanding dramatically, but most of them still within the low value chain of the whole industry. So compared with the whole world, the productivity still low. So I think that's also very important point to keep in mind. Now, that's the industry. Back to the service sector, what we observe is the administration sector and a gradual slowdown, and also transportation and also gradual slowdown. And we don't see very much change in the education and the healthcare and over roughly 30, 40 years. The sales and the retail costs increase all dramatically. So within the service sector, we also see the structure change. Particularly, we divide the service sector into the market service sector and non-market service sector, because this is also, for me, it's important to see what positive we need in the futures. We will see the market service sector, hotels, restaurants, and transportation, this type of service increase dramatically, and the market service also, and in the range also, the share of employments of the total share of service picked up. And compare with the productivity between the market service sector and non-market service sector. And the non-market service sector basically is education, healthcare, public administration. And the market here in kind of hotel, restaurant, I say the business and the communication and all those things. You will see the productivity gap is huge. It's huge. The non-market and the service sector productivity is extremely low, which also gives us a hint about where and how China can move in the futures. So when you see the labor productivity, right, you will see the market really service labor productivity picked up, and non-market it really value-added employees really per labor productivity drop and stay very low. And among the different sectors, we'll see sales and within the market service and goes to retail. This is particularly with the e-commerce goes very well, and the financial sector doing quite well. But if you will see the business service is quite low, and also on the transportation is very low, which is a little bit of a surprise on the labor productivity side. So within the service, we all see the different productivities across different subsector in service. And but go back to the non-market service, right? This is education, this is public administration, this is health, and productivity almost unchanged since the financial crisis to today. This also gives us a hint for where China could move and what China can do in the next. For international comparison, so when we done those studies, analysis within the sectors across service and industry, within industry and service, so we did a comparison with international experience. So those are the different countries, and the UK, France, particularly at the same income level or the high income level. You will see this is a real labor productivity and the market service actually. It's not too bad. It's more or less in line with international experience and historical data, right? Americans, the US is way high, it's there. But China is given the lower income level, right, around this level. So it's not too bad. It's in line with its curve. So market service sector in China actually is doing quite well. But in finance, in financial sector, actually productivity is even higher than sort of the trends are here, right? The trends are here. So it's way above the high. And it's very interesting, the wholesale and the sales sector have a very high productivity. I guess it's both of them because e-commerce and artificial intelligence are supported today. So it's way high, right? It's compared with the historical data, China become outlier in the positive way. So that's also interesting. Hotel, not too bad, right? So China's hotel productivity, you will see, and compare with international level, it's not too bad. Still a little bit of above average. But transport is in line with average, but still not very high. So this is, but I have to say the high-speed railway is still the new issues. I guess productivity is not showed up in this chart yet. We have to wait for a few years, but it's still relatively weak, which is it's a little bit of confusing, but also says the transport, because there's hundreds of millions people moving around, particularly in the holiday days, right? So the whole system is still labor-intensive, productivity is still low. The whole system have a huge room to reform and to push forward. So this is very low. But if you're looking for healthcare, compared with international experience, it's way low. It's way low, right? If you're looking for education, compared with international, it's way low, right? So in those particular sectors, and we'll see China have a huge room to catch up. But the further reform also needed. The government administration, I mean, it's obviously that means you have too many government officials sitting in the room, but does not produce many things, right? So compared with the since they're still low, and the cultural entertaining sector doing very well. I mean, think about it, it's 1.3 billion people sitting there enjoy the cultural entertaining, right, every day with a mobile phone with the video in hands. So it's a scale impact, so it's way above. So those compared with international is also very, very interesting. But the one thing is also confusing is the China computer service is way low. This is everybody says China have a pretty good technology sector, particularly on the intelligence. But the computer service, the IT information sector, is not. So that's a big question mark. I think we need a further study to understand. And the business service is not, it's still more or less in line with the international experience, but not very high. That's a huge room, particularly when manufacturers today move into the service area. I think the business service area is a huge area for future growth. So that's also one of the big issues. Now, China will continue to move into a service sector, right? We forecast the service sector will gain more shares in GDP, and the tertiary and the industry sector will continue to coming down. So that means in the next few years or next 10 years, China have to come up with ways to dealing with productivity issues. Otherwise, any 1 percentage point I mentioned you gain on the service sector, you lost 20%, 1% GDP productivity. Then growth will continue to slow down. So that's the real challenge. And this is the trend we forecast that will happen. That's happened in the past few years, will continue. So how to promote, improve the productivity for both industry and the service become the key challenge. The bad news and the good news is to combine them together, and there's a huge room to catch up. This is the productivity we measured at 2005, 2015, compared with the productivity. We used the US productivity as a stand, as a base. US in the business with 20% of US level. In the hotel and the restaurant, it's not too bad. It's 70%, 75% US level now. I guess US hotel and the restaurants are still in pretty low productivity areas. I guess you can feel hotel is now fantastic. Seriously, Chinese hotel is much better than hotel in Washington, D.C., right? I mean, you even don't have a gym. But now that's the puzzle. Information and computer service productivity, actually compared with 2005 and 15, it only drops, it's only 20% of US level. So that's the US strength. The information technology sector is quite a big challenge for China. The wholesale retail in China is almost 60% US because e-commerce and in China. So this chart is really represent two sides, right? The sad side, let's say China's service sector productivity is still way low. The positive side is there's huge room to catch up if you have the proper policy, if you can move resource, push the way upward, you can catch up. So that's the whole thing. So what should China do? So there's a reason China come to a three-pronged strategy. The first issue is opening up. The second issue is market-oriented reform. The third issue is digitalization. And that's very much technology, and particularly artificial intelligence. So the first thing is the market access in finance sector, I think is broadly open in China today since Xi Jinping announced in April for all meeting last year. Ownership, is no longer the barriers. You can move in, build on your 100% own the foreign financial institutions, and no cap on the foreign ownership issue, and also all the products is open, from derivatives, the credits, and the payments, and also on those things, and on the security management, the insurance companies. So the financial sector is broadly open now, as I just mentioned. And also in financial sector, we encourage foreign ownership in trust, in financial leasing, auto finance, and currency brokerage, and consumer finance. This is really the whole new areas China never opened to the outside, but now it's open. I think that's also a big span. And broadly expand the foreign banks business area. Jiang also used to sit in the board of HSBC. HSBC aggressively moved into the Delta area. They built more than 150 branches just in two to 3 years. And they are doing very good and making a lot of money, I have to say. This is particularly with the Bay Area plan in there. Actually, they move ahead of a plan now. So HSBC is very smart, I have to say. They smell there's a Bay Area project, right? They position themselves well and leverage on this open door policies and insurance agents and also other service in China. So financial sector is broadly open, and open in financial sector with the card clearance, payments issues, and the reading service, and also now broadly open. So we have a UBS moving, have a first 51% on the security company, and we have a JP Morgan also second on the 51% ownership security companies. We have a Citi, have a settlements, the payment systems. We have a Standard Chartered open the Chinese reading companies, and also we have a SWIFT is going to be build a local China SWIFT operation. So the financial sector is really broad open. But it's a more broad opening up policy, not limit only within the financial sector, but also in more shipping, internet shipping service, management, and agency, right? International maritime cargo handling service, and container yield, and all storage business, all those things can happen. Auditing, architecture design, and the rating service, and so those areas also open to the foreigners, and obviously on R&D research, and particularly relaxed, and also cancellation of foreign constraints in the areas of transportation. I think that's also very important sector, and logistic, and the professional service. So it's a broad open door policy in the service sector. I think that's also very important. And open telecom, cultural, tourism, and other fields to the outside world in the scope of, particularly in this area, still within the free trade zone. But as long as you landed in free trade zone, you can expect to move forward outside zone and operate in whole China. So this is quite a big open up. And meanwhile, and support with more domestic market reform, not only foreigner and foreign capital move into the Chinese market, but also allow the Chinese, the local non-state owned capital and the monies move into that in service sectors and in education, in healthcare, in professional service, in entertaining and cultural areas. And so this is broadly open to the private sector, which is also a big policy. So this is the second promo strategy. The third issue is a digitalization. Artificial intelligence is quite active in China now. I just put these companies in the pretty messy picture. I mean, you may know some of them. iFlyTech is a language translator, language recognition, which is almost the #1 in the world. It's small here. So I put this, it's in the yellow area. That means China pretty much lead computer vision, which is very important. Artificial intelligence has a huge implication for almost all industry service, as quite a big in China. Voice recognition, is also big, and cloud computing, which is also quite a big in China. And there are 3 big giants, which is Baidu and Alibaba and Tencent, and the 3 big companies. Along them, the first is applications, the second is the technology layer, the third is the basis layer. So on the fundamental issue, technologies, the research issues. So you will see Chinese companies are, in fact, really active in all those different areas, artificial intelligence. And the manufacturers, we observe that more and more Chinese companies, industries, adapting artificial intelligence technologies. They came from new material development, wholesale self-operating and intelligent voice communications, self-drive vehicles. I mean, almost everything from the designing to the processing to the quality control to the logistic and the shipping to the outside. It really happened in everywhere. The key issue is the idea in the manufacturers. I gradually realized, which is the picture I draw from my personal experience. I'm currently doing artificial intelligence strategy for Shenzhen Authority. Shenzhen is a Chinese Silicon Valley, right? It's all the tech companies there. So I visited 100 companies. I found it's very interesting. What happened in the manufacturer is the first time there's a 3-dimensional structure now with the help of technology. The first is a vertical interconnect linkage. It's the first time with artificial intelligence helps, we'll be able to link the information and digitalize information from production floor up to the cloud computing. And middle went through all the finance, went through all the strategies. Because before, all the IT works just cannot go through the physical manufacture layer, never. But now, when you have a processing, every minute, all the data from manufacturing processing will ship up above to the financial data, to the structural data, and get into the cloud, and with the cloud computing, and come back to manage the whole process and make sure the quality and the product is fine. I think that's very important. The second dimension is really managing the supply chain, which is absolutely amazing. Until you can manage your supply chain in a very smart way, you will not be able to manage your modern manufacturers. I don't know whether you know a drone company called Dajiang, DJ. Anyone know this company? Raise your hand. Yeah. Wow. Gosh, you all professional photographers, I guess. 15 years ago, in the products in the market, the American company have a 78% market share. Dajiang have 12. Dajiang actually is doing the OMD for the American company. Only 15 years today, everything reversed. Dajiang have a 78% market share. American company today have a 15%. Wow, 15 years. Why is that? What happened? I visited the company, talked to the teams carefully several times. I realized the whole secret is managing the supply chain. Dajiang have a 358 company from small to big being part of their supply chains, provide all the parts, different things for the companies. They assemble finally in Shenzhen. Within the 358, 51 companies are core companies. All those companies have a 1-hour drive distance from the Dajiang's head office in Shenzhen. So they convene the meeting every week, get these 51 core supply companies, sit down together to analyze the information they get back from the customers and from the cloud that we did, and try to change the model and improve the quality and the process. Adaptation is absolutely amazing. I mean, the speed is absolutely amazing. So they're always way ahead than their American competitor in terms of improve the quality, in terms of bring the new products to the market, in terms of manage their customer response. 15 years, they changed the whole thing. So this has become very important. I saw quite a lot of companies now today and use the technology to manage the supply chain, as is very important. The third issue is also interesting, is product design. It's product design, usually people will get an idea, the smart people get feedback from market, customer feedback, and it takes 5 to 8 years to design a complete new product. So that's the way it is, if you think about a car, right? But today, with the technology, when you have one product, for example, this is a pager, a flipper, in the production process, the same time, you will have a digital image, we call it digital twin, exactly like this one in the computer and in the cloud. So when the products in the production process, you get the feedback from customers, you get all the information, you will change the modification, all those things, and the machine automatically get all of it, change the products, design a new product by machine. The new product design is no longer from customer feedback. It's from two things. From machine, from this really, the digital twin, and from people's imagination. We all say Apple is the first product produced for the world. It does not come from consumer feedback, right? It's from Jobs' imagination. With that technology, I would say from now on today, in the future, every product, if you want to survive, will be a product like Apple. We're designed complete from nowhere, with a machine and with your imagination. But fit in the process and fit in the human nature and the human need in the future. So that's changed the whole thing. I think that this digitalization will change the whole manufacturing, and which Foxconn, right? Foxconn is the first company, obviously they assemble iPhone and can link and from equipments and factory, from production floor, a workshop, to all the cloud. It really goes through the complete vertical process and manage the second layer of the supply chain. It's absolutely amazing, the factory. The factory used to have 3.5 million people. Today, you know how many people they have? Anyone want to have a guess? 500,000. They lay off 3 million people. What do? They replace the 3 million people with 5 million robots. So every minute, huge data was generated in the process, and within this artificial intelligence, in the cloud computing centers. So they will be able to bring down the mistake in the iPhone from 0.7 over 100 10 years ago to less than 0.5 over 1 million. And more than that, the system cannot improve the quality and make sure exactly the first phone and the millionth phone is the same. Any time they found that if the phone production had a problem, they realized what part and what machine made the problem. They changed the machine. That's the revolutionary things. Because you can continually improve the design and the quality and efficiency of a machine. That's changed the whole manufacturing. And also in Hell, the company used to produce all those refrigerators, those air conditioning is not, I guess, not well known here, but they also build a system. You can pick whatever things you want, personalized things they can produce on the assembly line, sent to your home within 24 to 48 hours. And China have a huge automation space. We found Korea have the highest the robotic statistics in the world. Every 10,000 work, Korea have almost 530 robots. In China, it's really less than 20. So it's a huge room for the automation. The whole manufacturing in the future is a digitalization and automation. So the same thing, the productivity in China, you will see improved quite a bit in the past really 15 years, but still way low compared with others. This is Vietnam, so China is beat Vietnam only, but with all the others, still way. And China is today the world's largest manufacturing companies. So digitalize Chinese manufacturing, I think that will be a very important whole thing to process and improve the efficiency and improve the products, and they will bring the growth and back to a more stable path. Logistic distributions is also industries, another area is huge. Today, from production to the transportation, storage, and distribution to the consumers, it's a whole thing you can manage in the cloud by AI. Packing, collection, transfer, delivery, data processing, smart storage. What you see as this fantastic picture in the machine running in the storage room. It's in Amazon, it's in the Jingdong, it's in Ali, everywhere. They will change the whole sector. And it's a huge sector. People never realize. Logistics sector had a roughly 13 trillion RMB business. It's a huge industry. What we observed what happened to the logistics sector is only very tiny, small part of the whole thing. And in China, it's account roughly 10%, more than the growth is more than 18%, 12%. China is 15% for GDP. It's way high, and America is 8%. So that means the productivity in the logistics sector is not very high, it's not very strong. So it's a huge room to improve the productivity in the service sector. And given you observe what happened in China, I think that will happen shortly now. I'm back to Beijing for 2 years now. I have to say, I never go to the shopping mall. I never go to a grocery store in 2 years. I order everything through Taobao or Ali, whatever. Right, from 10 cents to bananas to a car, everything you wanted, they deliver to your house. For grocery things, you pay less than 10 cents of the cost, 20 cents. They deliver to your house in 60 minutes. It's a huge area. There are many in financial sectors. I take a small case. I will say we all know the answer. I know this is Suning Financial Company, a bank. They set up the bank because Suning is the e-commerce company. They have a huge data. They want to set the bank. The bank have 1,000 people. Among the 1,000 people, 700 are engineers. They have only one branch, but they have more than $1 trillion loans, and they serve millions of customers, and everything is managed by the AR, and they will be able to manage the NPL ratio below 1%. This is just a medium-sized, small-sized Chinese bank with 1,000 people, right? But it's absolutely amazing. It's happening in financial sector. In healthcare, it's extremely active in the past 2 to 3 years. So many things happen. All those companies are listed here. are doing the healthcare, from remote prevention and care, which is a big area, diagnostic support, second, medical treatment and support, research, operation, and marketing. It's really funny. I thought the marketing can be the big area. In fact, it's not what I found is. And the most operate on the remote and the prevention and the care, because you cannot find a fantastic hospital in the mountains, in the hilly area, in the Western China particularly. With 5G, because delay is really short to 0.1 second this time, now you can do remote operation easily. So the healthcare is also moving to artificial. E-commerce goes very dramatically. In 2005, China's e-commerce less than only, in the whole less than 1%. Today it's 42. It's American that dropped to 24%. China became 42, largest e-com. Mobile payments, China is 11 times bigger than the United States. And in terms of big unicorn companies, and China's the number also increased dramatically. So e-commerce is a big area income. It was a penetration of income to China in roughly 2013 across the line of the United States. Today we have a 16% penetration, American roughly 10%. Scale bring the technology. That's the important point. Scale bring in the technology. So speed, the capacity to deal with the process per second, it's a per second every 1,000. It's 120,000 in China. Ali, in the US, I don't want to name whose company. It's only 38. Because the scale bring the technology, bring in the speed. That's also change. And China have a huge scale advantage, right? The total internet user is 730 million. It's way ahead of India equivalent to the EU, and the Americans roughly less than 300 million. And the mobile internet user China is 700 million. And the digital natives and also in China is way higher than almost everyone. So because artificial intelligence still today is very much big data driven. You have a huge population, huge data, huge end user, which help you technically come from end flow move above the upstreams. So they will see two different approaches, I will see. China will move from end user moving above the upstream to the research to the technology. Americans from the fundamental research side go down to the applications. So these two approaches will be very interesting to see these two things happen in the two different countries. So back to China. With this three approach, I think they'll give us the policy space and the confidence China can move forward. So this is China's catch-up, right? In the 80s, China's per capita GDP is less than 3% for US level. It's way, way low, right? In the 80s. Then this is the growth back and forth. Since China joined WTO, growth will go back to 12, 14%. The growth is slowing down, but the convergence continues. Today is more than 25% now. Put China into the global pictures. We'll see is Poland. Poland in the 90s, John, you remember, right? They also go back and forth, go the whole way. Chile also go back, Latin American aid debt crisis. It's two interesting cases. I put them together. Here's Asia. In Asia countries, this is India, this is Vietnam, right? And China, in the early days, growth picked up, but convergence didn't happen because the base is so small, so low. But gradually, base expand, the convergence expand. Today, we get into the little bit of 20, 23%. But that's the Korea. The growth continue after the Korea reached roughly $10,000 US. Yeah. Okay, I guess there's some Korea here is happy or unhappy. They try to make a noise. Or some Polish guy here. So very much I hope China will go along the line Korea. The answer is not clear, I have to say, because we in this very interesting critical point, as I showed in my first slide, it's the crossover. China is exactly in the point it can go up, it can go down, right? But with the data we show, with the sectoral shift and a huge room to improve productivity. And the policy we're adapting today, particularly on the reform on the market, I think there's a hope for China moving to sustainable long-term growth. So conclusion is the Chinese economy is moving to high income level category. And the key is the sectoral shift along with the productivity growth, both in the industry and the service sector. The room to improve industry productivity is huge. The room to improve service sector productivity is also huge. So the key policy to drive the future growth is structural reform. That's mean compose the market reform, opening up, and digitalization. So that's my report back to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. That was a terrific presentation, as you can tell from the audience response.
Thank you.
And I'm sure it presented a lot of information that was new to most of the audience. I'm going to ask a few questions, but then I'll bet there are a lot of things that the audience would like to ask, because it was a very challenging, very fascinating presentation. Let me ask a simple big picture question. The 13th five-year plan described an economy that would become increasingly market-driven over time.
Mm-hmm.
When President Xi came to the United States for his state visit, he gave one public address in Seattle, and I had the honor of attending, in which he said, structural reform is the way forward for the Chinese economy. Since that time, of course, there have been several issues that arose. We'll come back to some. One, the very rapid credit growth and the especially rapid growth in the shadow banking sector. We'll come back. But I wanted to focus on a sense that a renewed emphasis, or at least there was a sense in the West that there's a renewed emphasis on the role of state-owned enterprises, and questions about the reform, the progress on reform. The recent National Development Forum in Beijing, which is always a very important venue where important foreign investors and others come to listen, presented, I would say, an impression much like yours here, which is actually the main chance remains the way forward as described in the 13th five-year plan, a focus on structural reform. Is that the correct view? And the earlier doubts about the emphasis on state-owned enterprise a confusion, or how would you describe it?
The whole history of a 40 years reform in China shows the reform is the key drive to move China's growth to move forward. I think that's very clear. Historically, all the evidence is there, right? I mean, if you're looking for the future, I think my study just showed in a clear way, if you want to over the middle class trap hurdles, the only thing is continue to reform to open up, right? Mm-hmm. So you will see there are a lot of concerns. SOE grow strongly in the past, particularly in right after financial crisis things. But private sector also grows strongly. But I think that if you emphasize, you're looking into the particularly new policy in the past 2 years, and it's really re-emphasized on the market-oriented reform, emphasize on the private sectors. And on the credit issue, it's very important issues. In China, credit obviously the way high, and the debt ratio is way high. Today it's 248% now, still compared with the global level, it's way high. But the good news is the ratio has been stabilizing. Right? Compared with a year ago, 2018, compared with 2017, the total debt level drops 1.7%. SOE, big SOE debt level drops 0.7%. And the growth remained roughly 6.5 last year, right? So that means you observe the model start to change. So the model no longer is credit-driven growth model, investment-driven growth model. So it's more supply side. And when I say supply side, I would say the digitalization also helps. The new technology will be a big drive force to add this new toolboxes and to support the long-term growth.
Next, it's probably not so well known that foreign direct investment flows into China have slowed very substantially in the last few years, and especially because foreign investment in the manufacturing sector has gone elsewhere in Asia and not in China. And heretofore, investment in services sector has been very restricted, so there's been almost no foreign direct investment in services. The reforms you described, the opening up reforms, sounds like we should expect, if these reforms are implemented, that there will be a new resurgence of foreign direct investment into the Chinese economy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I very much expect to see more capital flow moving. In fact, there is a difference between sort of talk, particularly in the media, and the real numbers. And FDI moving in China continue quite strongly. In the last year, it's 180 billion US dollar, which is almost the highest level in the post-party years history. So capital continue move in, and also on the portfolio capital, when China was included in the MSCI and the bonds and equity market, we expect to see roughly 1 trillion RMB capital move into the Chinese bonds market and 500 billion RMB move into the Chinese equity market.
Does everybody know what the MSCI, the Morgan Stanley index?
Yeah, it's the Morgan Stanley index for the bonds and also for the equity market, including in the index also and helps the capital moving, portfolio capital moving. So I very much expect to see more capital moving to China and FDI moving to the service sector, which is quite a big.
Today, the role of the foreign-owned firms, of course, the opening up you described in finance is brand new.
Yeah.
The role in joint venture firms in terms of market share is very small. Are you expecting that this opening up is going to produce a significant or notable increase in market share held by foreign-owned firms?
I think foreign share market share will increase. Yeah, I myself made a huge mistake, I have to say. In 15 years ago, more than 15 years ago, when China joined WTO, I did an opening speech. I say, I think 15 years later, which is 2018, and the foreign bank shares, including HSBC in China, probably have 15% of a market share, 20% of profit shares. And in 2018, to my surprise, the foreign market share dropped to 1.86,
yes,
even below than 2.27 in 2003.
Exactly.
So I was completely wrong. So I said, geez, what's going on? I thought I'm pretty smart. How could I make such a big mistake? So I publicly acknowledge it. I made a mistake, okay? So I have to say that I made a mistake. But then various reasons. I mean, the one reason is because the crisis happened in the United States, not in China. China's financial sector grows strongly, explosively. So growth is so strong. And the foreign capital, and constrained by the capital and all the other things. I think that's one big reason. The second thing also, we allow foreign capital to operate in China, but they have a limited business scope. Regions, products, also subject to the certain regulatory requirement. So although they're in China, they cannot do everything, right? So that's the reason, and after 15 years, the foreign banking shares in Chinese market even shrink now. But now it's different, right? For example, HSBC have branches, almost 180 in the Delta area now. And they can do everything, right?
Yes.
So I always see the foreign share increase more dramatic, which is good because, for example, in financial sector, it's a market competition based, right, on the industry. So we should bring more external competitions, improve efficiency for the whole sector. I think that's good.
And
I hope I will not make a mistake this time. After 15 years.
I don't think so. What you described also is an enrichment of the forms in the financial sector. And does that mean that you would expect after a period in which credit growth in what's called the non-bank sector, not because shadow banking sounds pejorative.
Shadow is shrinking now, moving back. Yeah.
Is this
happening, yeah.
opening up going to result in a renewed growth of the non-banking sector?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the Chinese shadow banking is slightly different from the U.S. The U.S. is very much a money market, and since China is very much off balance these things, right?
Yes.
So the first step is to bring this off balance sheet back to the balance sheet. That's happened in the past few years. Financial sector deleveraged more than 6% of GDP now. So deleverage is moving pretty fast. I think we'll continue to ensure that happens that way.
Two additional quick questions and then to open it up. With this liberalization and market opening you described, are you expecting an opening up of the capital account and that provide greater liberalization for Chinese investors to invest in foreign securities?
Yeah, capital account is separate. To support the current opening policies, I think the capital account also have to reform further to make the capital flow much easier. If you allow the foreign company doing the business in China, but you can constrain the capital move across the board, it doesn't make sense, right? So I think the capital account liberalization will continue to move forward. But that will take time. Yeah, it's not easy because you need to build the whole capital market with the hedging derivatives with all the systems before you can dealing with a big volume cross-border capital movements.
Great. You know, you can tell why Mina was such a wonderful colleague. So insightful, and it's I feel like
well, I learned from you. You were in the IMF before I was, right? We were colleagues in the IMF building. We had a wonderful time.
We could go on
dinner
for
in
hours.
John's very nice Georgetown house. Enjoy his collection of French wine.
Moving right along, let's open this up to questions from the audience. So let's start. You've been very anxious. Please wait for a microphone and tell us who you are and ask your question.
Thank you so much. Jiawei Li, SAIS alumni, IMF, currently MCD. So I have two questions about your presentation. The first one's about the GDP, the convergence or the catch-up. Do you think the GDP or GDP per capita is a real good measure for the catch-up? Because GDP is a measurement during 1 year is a flow concept. The second is, second is about the production side. Things you mentioned about AI, this all about production side story. What about the demand side story? So in order for the structural, yeah, thank you so much.
Well, the first question is a big question, right? I mean, we all know GDP is not a perfect measure for the welfare. We're all know. But we all know today GDP may be the only measure we have to measure the welfare. So until we found, I'm sure future you may design a new measurement called the new GDP, or also with your name. I don't know, what's your name? Jiawei Li. Li Jiawei. Oh, so you may find the Li index of a new GDP, right? So seriously, OECD started with what happiness, right? What is the good human being? Those things. GDP is not a perfect thing, but still, it's the things people understand, right? So that's the reason I use a 5 years moving average. I try to smooth, those bumping things. So I did a 10-year, but I found a 5 years more reasonable. I fully understand that. I sympathize your question. I hope you will find the Li index someday. So that would be fantastic. So that's the first issue. The second issue, so you say is productivity in demand side, yeah. That's a fantastic question. The demand side, basically, you have to bring the people's income growth strongly. Yeah. In China, people's income grows quite strongly in the past during reform periods, so roughly around 8 to 10% every year, stronger than GDP growth. But basis is still so low, and the per capita disposable income level still way low. So I think that's the key issue if you want to bring big aggregate demand, very much from consumer side, not from state side. You have to bring the income. But this is sort of a catch-22. Before you can distribute you don't like a GDP or lead GDP, okay? Use your name. You need a productivity, right? You have to make sure the pie is big enough. So this is two things linked together. I agree with you. And income distribution, and particularly the income level is a big challenge. Aggregate demand is a big challenge. Yeah.
Right there. You have two out. Yes. we'll do one and then the next. And then
Thank you. My name is Minjie Lee. I'm a first-year student here in SAIS. My first question is that you mentioned that Fixcom are using robot to replacing the current employees who were working there before. So I was wondering how would those people who are lost their jobs get a way to find a new job? What's the current policy status for those like
Good
boss
question.
or employee
Good question. Good
employment? And second one is that you also you mentioned a great picture of what China has in terms of technology, but what about the real industry? Because I have personally a friend whose family is doing like textile industry in China, south part of China, and they have a hard time, especially in 2018, doing finance, like lending money from the bank, and they're really having a hard time. And also my friend personally graduating from 2018 also have a hard time finding jobs, so that the whole economy basically in 2018 is quite kind of devastated for people domestically. I was wondering what's your opinion in terms of the current economic and financial status in China in terms of that question. Thank you very much.
To support the industry, particularly SME and the innovations, they need the financial support. Obviously, there's two different types of support. One thing, financing for SME, one thing is VC, venture capitals for the new companies. Actually, VC is so blooming in China everywhere. My concern is they may have a bubble there. So, and I think that's the area. But also, China pay more attention on the financing for SME now in the past few years, particularly because don't want the money move into the financial sector, which is all the way we observe, not only in China, but in the United States, with particularly QEs, all the liquidity move to financial market, which create a huge problem, right? And financial market way so high, risk way high, but also make a huge income distribution issues. So China, the new policy in the past, particularly 12 months, really emphasize and the financial sector service, the real sector, particularly the credit to the SMEs. I think that's important. Now, your first question is a big question. When machine replace labor, what those people do? I mean, this is a big issue. This is a big concern. Everybody, there are various estimations, right? McKinsey says, in roughly 2050, so 50% of the labor force will be replaced by labor. So what does people do? People go fishing every day, or drink Chinese tea. And no, this is a very China. It's a global issue. It's not only a China issue. A study in Germany says, the truck drivers, right, when they lost the job, in the second and the third month, most of them social time is they go to the bar, drink a beer. They cannot wake up, 8 o'clock in the morning. They don't wear ties. In Germany, German drivers have a tie. It's very serious. 6 months later, when they go back to the job, the positions, they really cannot function as the same person 6 months ago. 6 months without job changes the whole thing. So it is not economic issue. It's really the human issues. I mean, this is quite a challenge. So I'll get into these pictures in Foxconn. I mean, 3 million people laid off. What's happened? Foxconn gave people quite a good package, and the local authority also subsidized, give them money. So every people they lay off, so they have a cushion, right? A cushion may not necessarily big enough for the rest of their life. So it's very interesting. Some people use this money, open sort of a mom-pop shop near the factory, because they say that's open a small restaurants, open shop. Those sounds easy, right? But when the people working for the assembly line for years, the skill set is very different. And almost all those shops failed after 12 to 18 months. It's very interesting. So someone spends those money, go to the re-educations, right? They try to teach them, because most of them are high school graduates. But jump to the college level is not easy. They realize, even they go back to school, if you want to jump to college level, you still difficult to find white-collar job. But you don't want to go back to being a blue-collar once again, because Foxconn still have a pretty nice working environment. So that's also difficult. What I found is also very interesting is a group of people take the money because they come from the rural area. So go back to their home. So they become the most smart people in the village because they have money, they see the world, they have knowledge, right? So that if they open a mom and pop shop in the village, they succeed. And they do various things. They do tours, they do family business, and small manufacturing. And after 18 months, when you revisit this case, they found this is the most successful side. So the whole thing is to try to convince these people to go back to their hometown. That's good for them, but also they change the village, which I have to say is still a very Chinese case, I would say. Right? I cannot say it's a very international recognized experience. It's still very Chinese, but practically it worked very well. So that's the case. So far, what I can tell you, how can we solve this problem? Yeah, but that's a good question.
It's an interesting comment, by the way. Later this afternoon, Raghu Rajan is going to appear here.
Oh, Raghu Rajan.
Talking about his new book about reemphasizing the role of communities.
Community, yeah. Community is important, yeah.
But go ahead, back there, and then we'll come around.
Thank you. My name is Guohua Huang. I'm from the Fiscal Affairs Department of IMF. My question is about the aging population of China.
Yeah, aging,
because if we compare China with Korea,
I have a lot of IMF colleagues here.
yes.
You guys come to here to challenge me.
We don't have
Finally,
many
he gets his
alternatives.
chance.
Yes, if we compare China with
To challenge me.
Yes, China had a pretty much similar economic growth model over the past 40 years.
Yeah.
But Korea had this aging population issues after it became a high-income country.
Yeah.
But China now is still developing, middle-income country. It now has the aging population, the shrinking labor force. And also, in terms of the quality, the average of education years, China is lower than Korea when they had similar status of
getting older before getting rich.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. That's a China challenge.
Yeah. What's your view on this? Thank you.
No, this is a real. I'm sort of embarrassed to say I'm an old aging man. Belong to this part of aging problem to be solved. I look at the statistics. It's amazing. I did a very simple chart study. I compare with 2050, in year 2050, and then with today, 2018, right? So with the age 60, 80, 60 group, I subtract the added them to see in roughly 30 years later, what is the Chinese, what the aging cohort people will increase, what were jobs. I don't have slides anyway. The chart is amazing. The chart just say in 2050, only 3 aging cohorts have a net increased population, which is 80s, 70s, and 60s. Mm-hmm. All the population drops. The most drop happened in the 40s, then 41 to 49, and 20s, 21 to 29. Wow. So that means in 2050s, we lost most of the young labor force in the 20s and experienced the managers in the 40s. And all the people added for the whole society is above the 60s. Which is a real thing, because as an economist, we're pretty confident on the demographic change. Right? The data, the accuracy for the data is there. It is a big, big challenge. Globally, the good example is Japan, right? If you're looking for Japan from 1990 to today, roughly 30 years, 25 years experience, the whole economic structure changed dramatically. Medicare, care, service increased dramatically, manufacturing shrinking, construction shrinking, financing shrinking, because saving rate drops, right? Mm-hmm. And all those things, and the government expenditure increased dramatically on public health and all. So the whole economy, whole demand side structure will change. That's the whole thing. And the supply side also on the labor side will change. I think the robots change the supply side function, can replace the missing labor force. But how much the demand side change will change the growth and economic activity, I think that's quite a big challenge. I have to confess, I don't have a complete picture for that. I saw the demographic change in China. I saw the huge potential impact on China. This is the one area I'm currently studying on it. And I hope after years, and you're still in IMF, I can give you a full picture. But this is a concern, because we don't have very much international experience. Japan is the only one, a little bit of a Nordic this thing. And our income base is much lower compared with Japan and South Korea. So China will build a completely different new aging society model in terms of demand structure, in terms of nursing and healthcare systems. And the community go back will become very important in this context. Yeah. And robots and IT will play more important role.
Yeah. Interesting. Yes, here.
You don't give the chance to Peter. Peter raised hands 5 times.
Hi, Mr. Zhu. I'm from Xinhua News Agency of China, a reporter. And
Oh, you're a reporter, gosh.
I'm an alumni of Tsinghua, so
Huh?
I'm an alumni of Tsinghua.
Oh,
so
Tsinghua,
we
okay.
share something.
So be nice.
Very nice. So my question is more concerned about China's, given its growing economic strength, its relationship between China and the international development institutions, for example, IMF and World Bank, because the spring meetings are going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's yesterday or the day before yesterday, Secretary Mnuchin said the U.S. is supportive of IMF having more resources, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a rise in the quota. So I'm wondering, as a former deputy managing director of the IMF, what is your take on that? And also, David Malpass yesterday said at the World Bank conference that China's relationship with the World Bank is evolving because it's from being a large lender to becoming a very large donor. So, what do you see the evolving relationship?
Well, the first issue, a formal deputy managing director usually don't have comments on Secretary of the United States, right? I mean, I'm no longer in the official capacity, so I don't think I have any comments on whatever the U.S. official says. I think that's the key issue. But in broader sense, right, I think it's important for China being a big international community, play a big role, being the second largest economy in the world, right? And it's also important for the U.S. and China work together to continue to improve the global governance. There's still room to improve global governance, give more voice and say for emerging market. Emerging market in terms of trade, GDP, growth, contribution to the whole world, all succeeded more than 50% now. So I think we need to move into that direction. And because after 10 years financial crisis, what we observe is, number one, the global debt ratio is not a decrease, but increase more than 60%, which means the potential risk is high. The second issue is interconnectivity increased dramatically, right? That means if crisis happen, the spillover can be huge. And the third issue is the policy space today is much limited than 2008. 2008, we have all the government have a fiscal space quite well. We have monetary policy space, but today, 0 interest rates, right? Debt is way high. So we don't have a policy space. So that means the potential risk is very high. So in that sense, I think we need to support IMF getting more resources, make sure IMF have enough reasonable resource to dealing with a potential crisis situation.
Thank you. Peter, did you? Yeah, right here.
Thank you. Peter Bottelier, I used to teach here at SAIS. until a few years ago. And I see
Not only used to
several-
teach us, Peter used to be my boss. Peter was the director for China in the World Bank for years.
Yeah.
And in 90s. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to stop you there. Thank you very much for your presentation. You gave us much more information than at least I could absorb in the limited time available. Will you share are you willing to share your slides either on an individual basis or putting them on some website so that we can?
Well, when boss says, the only answer is yes, sir.
Okay.
This will be on the SAIS website.
SAIS website.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My first question was already
Oh, you
asked
have more
by John
questions?
Lipsky, so I will elaborate on that. I think the international dimension of the question whether China will be able to realize that enormous potential for further productivity growth, sector by sector, where the scale factor is indeed an enormously important factor, will in part depend on China's relations with the outside world. Now, John asked you about the capital account and FDI. My question is China really prepared to create a level playing field between domestic Chinese enterprises, state-owned or private, and non-state foreign companies? The reason for this question is the following. You and many other people seem to equate opening up with lowering ownership caps or removing them altogether. That, in the eyes of many foreign enterprises, is not the key issue. The key issue in the eyes of many foreign enterprises are regulatory restrictions. You may have 100% ownership rights, full market access by that criterion, but still you are constrained where you can put your data, where you have to procure this and that and the other. It's the regulatory restrictions that are not on the radar screen for those who are arguing for the removal of ownership caps. My first question,
Wow.
if you allow me, how do you see this whole question of regulatory interventions in China?
Yeah.
My second question is related to the first. Where is China going? Where is the balance of payments going?
Good point.
Assuming that the capital account will continue to open up further, that the exchange rate will flexibilize, where is the current account going? We've seen an enormous movement in the last 10 years, last 12 years, 12 years, from more than 10% of GDP current account surplus to a marginal surplus of less than 0.5% last year.
Yeah.
Where is this going?
Yeah.
Is the balance of payments going to be a brake on the whole system?
Good point. Good point. Peter, and thank you. You know, when the boss asks a question, you got to be careful because they always ask a tough question. Right? They want to make sure you learn something and in the years. The first issue, the regulatory issues. I think you ask a fair question. Moving to the market, not necessarily being you're free and you have a fair play field, right? Because the regulatory, is here and there. I mean, even there's a lot of hidden, things, barrels here and there. It's not easy. But you have to look at the big picture. Strategically, China have two choices. One choice, move over this 10,000 middle class trap hurdle into the high income level, which Xi Jinping promised, and he firmly decided to lead the country move into that direction. Otherwise, you will move into, I see Brazil, I'm sorry to mention Mexico and Malaysia, right? You're stuck in there. So if you want to move into that high income level, then you don't have very much choice. You have to open the market, as I say, market-oriented reform, or whatever. But it takes time. It takes time. I agree with you. But when foreign company complains, they're still doing well in the past 40 years. They're making a lot of money in Chinese market, you have to say, right? But there's room to improve, I agree with you. What I'm trying to say is, Peter, the regulatory framework really takes time. go down to the nitty-gritty details, right? Accounting systems, for example, tax systems, right? Derivatives, and hedging, instruments. So there's a lot of things. If you want to make the financial sector being able to act freely, by their own design, you need a lot of, and supportive things. It takes time, but I'm confident in the sense, I'm lucky enough, observed the 40 years reform, right? And Peter, you will agree, the speed of change is huge, right? So in the future, I think we'll observe even big change in China. I think that's the first issue. Because strategically, the future and the strategic goal is very clear. So then the policy have to follow, right? I think that even a little bit of back force is not an issue. You raise the second also key issue, the current account. Chinese current account, usually more than around 10%, 9.7% right after, before the crisis, go down to less than 1%. And this year probably will be negative. China will run into the trade deficits, because middle income, grow up. China consume more and China export less, right? And saving rate also drops. That will have a huge impact on China and also on the whole world. The first issue is how China manage it when China have a current account deficit, right? For example, monetary policy base will change. Because Chinese monetary policy base before was, because we have a surrounding systems, every dollar we earn, the reserves, you put it in the central bank, you have to print, equivalent $1, 7 RMBs to the market, right? So the whole monetary base will change. I just give a very simple case. And, but also will have a profound impact on international. What happened, you compare 2008 to today. In 2008, global current account imbalance is huge. It roughly to 4.5% surplus and 4.5% deficits, right? China and the Middle East countries have most the surplus, and the US and a few other countries had the most deficits, and some European countries. Germany also belong to surplus countries, right? This number gradually slowed down in 10-year horizon to roughly 2% now, much smaller. But US continue have 3% trade deficits. I expect to see US continue to have a 3% trade deficit in the next 3 to 5 years. So US need external finance. When China don't have surplus, who will buy US bonds? US need a 1 trillion bonds issued this year to fill the budget deficits. Who will purchase the 1 trillion? That's a change in the whole structure of a bonds market. Although this international implication also huge. Then go back to China. When China have a current account deficit, China need a capital account open to absorb more foreign capital move in, right? So you need to make a reform on your capital account. So this is quite a big issue. And I think China is working on those issues to prepare the reform to meet these challenges. But the whole world also have to realize it's also changed in quite a big way. Yeah, I agree with you. But it's not only China issue. It's not only China issue at all. Yeah, because China provided most of capital to the whole world before. If it's gone, what will happen?
Well, that's on that profound note. We have
yeah, we're over time. Yeah,
we've come to the end of our time and a little.
We need a clean room
beyond.
for Raghu yeah.
But I think you'll join me in thanking Minju for taking some time to share with us and giving us that wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.